All good. No, it's all good. I'm going to ask them if they wanted it beforehand.
Cremation families don't.
Yeah.
But they're here. If you need them, save them for later.
Perfect. always. Our tradition, Jewish tradition, teaches that when the child asked, "Tell me of life," the sage answered, "Life, my child, is a mystery. We do not ask to be born, nor do we even understand the meaning of birth or of creation. We grow and we experience life's pleasures and pains. We love, and slowly, oh so slowly, we have come to realize that we have become, that we are something. And at that moment, we humble ourselves before the mystery of life and quietly say, 'Though I knew not, I have been granted the most precious gift of all, the gift of life.' And tradition asks that when the child asks, 'Teach me then of death,' the sage answered, 'Death, my child, is a mystery. It is the inevitable return of the gift of life, the gift which came free to us. We live as the trustee of that mysterious being, of that unexplainable becoming. Yes, you and I are but the trustees of life. We nurture it, we delight in it, we give of it to others. And at the appointed time, we sadly, yet with pride, return it to whence it came. The beauty, my child,' says the sage, 'is that what we are, what we have become, remains long after the gift has been returned. It remains as a precious keepsake with our loved ones who live on.' We are gathered here to say goodbye to Marc Hirschberg and to surround his family with love. In this time of grief, we listen to the voice of our sacred scriptures that bring us the ever-new message of God's nearness. It tells us of the kinship with the Creator in light and in darkness, in times of joy and in sorrow, in life and in death. Psalm 15 declares, 'Adonai, who may abide in your house, who may dwell in your holy mountain? Those who are upright, who do justly, who do not slander others or wrong them or bring shame upon them, who give their world and come what may, do not retract, who do not exploit others, who do not take bribes. Those who live in this way shall never be shaken.' Though I know Psalm 15 isn't a very well-known psalm, I picked it today because I felt it was the one that most captured Marc. Steadiness and goodness defined Marc's life, and that will bring him into God's eternal home. Why am I reading Psalms? Why do we read Psalms? We offer ancient words from our tradition because we don't know any other way, because our brains are at a loss that Marc is gone. Psalms are used at memorials to try and remember that even when we're in the unfathomable darkness of grief, life can and eventually will slowly turn to gray and then somehow to light, allowing our brokenness to awaken to life once again. So today we stop and recognize our loss. We feel it, we know it, we are shaken by it. But then we remind ourselves that with effort, eventually we will awaken to life once more. And so we celebrate all that was good in Marc's life, and we focus on our joyous memories, on the friendship and closeness we shared. We celebrate the blessing of having known him and the gifts of having loved him. We allow his memory to ignite a bittersweet sense of wonder that his life made an impact on us. And we take his memory and let it propel us forward. For even after the darkest night, the sun will rise. This is why we proclaim in our next psalm that even as we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we do not walk alone. We do not stop and get stuck, trapped in that valley of pain. We keep going, one step at a time. We keep trying to feel God's presence, keep striving to somehow feel goodness and mercy, to remember somehow that we, too, are forever welcome in the house of Adonai. And so we declare, Adonai roi lo achsar. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. God makes me to lie down in green pastures, leads me beside still waters, and restores my soul. God, you lead me in right paths for the sake of your name. Even when I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You have set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. It's time now to focus our memories on Marc, to hear from some of the people who loved and knew him best. And we are going to start with Marc Wisnitzer. Sorry. Marc's cousin. Please come. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marc's cousin. I'm Marc Wisnitzer, and with my sister Rita, who's here, probably, certainly knew him the longest, because we knew him as a baby and a child. And I will talk a bit about that, but to really know who Marc is, you have to know a little bit about his background. And Terry said that most of you know very little about Marc's history, his background before coming to Florida. So I'm going to indulge myself with a little bit of history for you, but I think it's important since his children are here and grandchildren, and those of you who loved him. I think it's important to remember what formed Marc as a child. So Marc was born in New York City 3 years after I was born in New York City, and we were both delivered by the same doctor in Manhattan. And we were both given our grandfather's name, Mordechai. Our grandfather was Max Hirschberg, who was born in Poland. And we carry his name, and Marc got the Hirschberg name as well, which is unique. So Mordechai Max Hirschberg was born in Poland and was very well educated, both secular and religious education, and actually taught after World War I at a military academy in Poland, but things in Europe after World War I are terrible. And if I go on too long, I'm sorry, but this is a bit of a docudrama, and you could see that if someone wrote it down, you'd say, who thought of that? So he left Poland and went to Germany, where he met our grandmother, our Oma Frida, who he taught, gave Hebrew lessons. He was her tutor. And they fell in love, and they got married, and they had their first child, my mother, Ida Hirschberg, who was born in Dresden. Things in Germany were terrible between the wars, so they moved on, and they went to Paris, where Marc's father, Lucien, was born, known as Lucky, our Uncle Lucky. And then they also had a third child born in Brussels, Victoria. So the family moved around a lot and ended up, of all places, on the island of Curacao, because it was welcoming for European Jews, and it was an easy place to adjust to. The children got a good education, and they had a very safe and actually pleasant upbringing. So Luki grew up and studied in Colorado, actually, at what was then Colorado A&M. I think today it's Colorado State. And he studied hydraulic engineering. And he got married to this beautiful young woman from the island of Aruba, from the Jewish community in Aruba. Her name was Martha Gottfried. And her parents had come from Eastern Europe, from the same area where my father's family had come from, Chernovitz, the city of Chernovitz, which had a big Jewish population. So they met and fell in love, and with his background, he went to Israel, and they tried living in Israel, but it was right after the War of Independence. So it was tough. And they decided to go back to the islands, and they ended up going to Aruba, where Luki worked for his father-in-law, Chaim Gottfried, also known as Muño, and his wife Rosa. They had a business called Casa Jaime in Aruba, and they settled in Aruba, and that's where Marc actually grew up. He was born in New York, but he was taken to Aruba, and he had an idyllic island lifestyle. Aruba at the time was a Dutch colony, and I don't know how many of you have been to Aruba lately, but it was nothing like the Aruba you may have visited in the last 30 or 40 years. There were no hotels on the beach. Try and picture miles and miles of sandy beach with palm trees, which is why they called it Palm Beach, and no buildings except for a couple of thatched roof huts in a small club, and that was it. So it was a very quiet island lifestyle where Marc grew up. Marc had that typical island education. He studied in Dutch. He, of course, learned English and spoke English at home. He learned papiamento. He learned Spanish. He spoke many languages very competently. And his childhood was a very normal one, a very loving household. He did have problems, though, because he was the oldest, and his father was strict, and sometimes he'd get into trouble. So they called him Dennis the Menace. He looked a little bit, I don't know if you know Dennis the Menace, the cartoon from the newspapers. He looked a little bit like him, and his ears would stick out, and his father actually taped his ears down to try and straighten them out, but I don't think it helped much. So this is the place where Marc grew up, and any of us who lived in the islands, my sister and I in Curacao, Marc and his siblings in Aruba, you develop a tie to a place like that that lives inside of you forever. And Marc's attachment to Aruba was there till the end. It's an identity that you get because it's such a positive experience. Marc was a really fun kid to play with. I used to play with him as a child, and I don't have any specific examples of our playing, but I can tell you that when he got in trouble, he usually was covering for one of his siblings. So that is something that he showed right to the end, I think, his commitment to his family. And he's going to be missed. The last time I saw Marc was 11 days before he died. I happened to be here. Terry had COVID, so she couldn't visit him, and I did. All he asked for, it was very simple. He really wasn't a complicated person. All he wanted was a Frappuccino. So I bring him Frappuccinos, and on the last day that I saw him, I brought some of his specialties, croquettes and chicken soup from Il Padrino, and he was happy, and he was calm and serene. And that's the way I hope to remember him forever, and I will miss him. He was a good soul, as they say in Yiddish, a git in the shume, right? And I hope that you'll understand that your dad had an amazing background and a strong tradition, and the Hirschberg family has really something to be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, Marc. We now invite up Robbie Nacron, longtime friend.
Whoa. So I'm Robbie Nacron, and I feel like I'm part of this family, because I am. And nothing I can say now will not, everything I say now will make sense to you, because this eulogy that Marc just gave, really, I'm carrying now into another dimension about Marc, and I think you got a basis of why I became friends with him. Because he was a good soul. Okay. Forever is gone, my friend. I would like to express my heartfelt sympathy to Terry, Lauren, Jackie, and our favorite goddaughter, Erica, for Marc's untimely illness and his subsequent death. My forever friend is gone. I can go back to a religious Jewish camp in New York, and now what Marc had said about Marc's history with family. We went to a camp, and I was 15 years old, and I was staring at a cute blonde girl from New Orleans. I think her name was Lisa. And it's been so long, but I do remember some skinny guy with an accent asking me, what do I think about her? And he was staring, she was standing next to me and staring at her harder. He was staring harder at her than I was staring at her. He was staring really hard at her. And we became instant friends. And every day at this, I call this a every day we pray camp. And for those of you who know about these camps, we didn't know it, but it was a very inexpensive camp in New York, and our families were looking always for deals. But this was a cult camp to get us to do Aliyah and go to Israel at 18. And we prayed in the morning, and we prayed it, and every time I saw Marc, it was, we just couldn't wait to get home. We just couldn't wait to get home. But the other part of it was that, for some reason, this blonde gave neither of us the time of day. So it didn't matter. I went back to North Miami Beach, and Marc went back to Hollywood, Florida. I got my driver's license first, and I started visiting the Hirschberg's house all the time. They spoke a language I never heard of, and in Marc's true form, he couldn't understand why I didn't know what papimento was. I knew about Hebrew, I knew about Spanish, I knew about Russian, I knew about Polish. My family's Polish. I knew about German. And when I would be in their house, the way that they spoke to each other was exactly like my Polish household. They were yelling at each other, but they were talking. And I'd go there sometimes, and I'd say, do I need to go? And he'd say, no, everything's cool, everything's cool. I'd say, okay, I'll stay. What Marc had said about Lukey, his father, and I wrote this unknowing, which again follows the format of what this friend I had was. His dad was a serious provider for that family. And I had forgot he was going for some engineering thing in Colorado. He was like a very, serious guy. And he expected Marc to be working and successful right after he graduated college in 1972. Can you imagine? It was like there was no room for, he was a serious man and there was no room for fun. And Marc liked to have fun. And I had fun with him. We had a great time together growing up. But he had this serious father, and I lived with Marc and Terry for a while when we were attending UM, and his serious father was so proud of him for attending college and getting a business degree and all this, he got him a Porsche. And he was like the Prince of Aruba driving around University of Miami with the top down. And Terry remember that? And he would be like going like this, and there wasn't anything that bothered this guy. And that's what I loved about him, because the 60s were a very turbulent time. And there were a lot of things going on, but nothing bothered him. Protests, demonstrations, nothing. War, nothing bothered him. He was great. He was great to be with. He was fun. So I can say after he graduated, he did do one thing, and I need to mention this. He looked up to his uncle as a mentor, and Marc had the ambition to make something of himself in America. He really did. He was like laser focused. A lot of fun behind him, but laser focused for a future. And Terry was dating him, and in 1975, they got married. It's been a long time. And Marc was working and building a career in corporate America. His parents, they were all watching him, like, you know, corporate America. You know what I mean? And that's how they thought. And Terry was working as an unbelievable interior designer. And everybody was catching on to her style, you know? And it was a good time. There were good times. My wife and Lainey and I bought our first house where the Hirschbergs bought. And I followed Marc, and rightly so. We were like brothers from the same mother. He was just as close to my parents as I was to his. And there would be many, many times where out of the blue, you know, I would talk to his mother for hours because his mother and I were close from when I was younger. It was just she was connected to me. And he, in fact, was very moved and saddened by the death of my father when my dad died like 23 years ago. He felt it because my dad loved him. My dad loved Marc. And you don't forget certain things. So even back then, I thought he would be around forever, and we would grow old together, and our grandchildren would grow up together. Okay, so that's a quick and touching story about Marc, but I have to say more. He was a quiet man, and he was a great listener. He remembered everything I told him, and when I had a problem, his response and solution were very simple and uncomplicated to understand, which is what Marc had referred to also. Those of you sitting out there that knew him, like I did, can testify that he said a lot sometimes with a few words, and that was his spirit. That was his spirit, a few words. And in life's challenges, bravery, dedication, commitment to family, with unconditional love, Aruba style. It was definitely Aruba style, that love. It was a thing we all witnessed. And for those that understood it, we appreciated it because we knew him so well. Marc was there for all of you who knew him, and his family was the most important part of his life. And when I would speak to him, I knew all about his children and what his grandchildren were doing and who they were, where they were going, and who they were with. Keep in mind that a long time ago, the girls brought home their future husbands, and Marc, to the day he passed, and those guys were sitting right there, to the day he passed, thought the world of Michael and Alex. And he told me he couldn't be happier for Jackie and for Erica, for their lifelong partners. And that's exactly how he felt, and that's exactly what he said. So let's talk about Marc and God. It's a personal thing, what I believe or what you believe. But Marc Hirschberg wasn't your temple daddy. No, he was not the temple daddy. However, when it came to Jewish family traditions and holidays, he was all in. Nothing more in the world, and this is the memories I have with the families out there that are here, his families out there, nothing more in the world made him happier and proud to have his kids and cousins and even my family around the table eating a delicious Jewish holiday dinner prepared by his wife for life, Terry. And she was a good cook, a great cook. That's why we came. The bar and bat mitzvahs, the birthdays, the weddings, the brisses, the namings, the graduations, all meant a future he thought that was blessed. And I was happy for the gratitude he shared when we spoke about it. I was very happy to hear him say things because those were very important things, and he didn't miss a beat. So let me wrap up the heartbreak and sadness that we all have for the family, and I know we do. When Marc passed, I told Erica, I think the next day, I was on the phone with her, that all I could hear for a few days were all the tapes in my head of Marc's voice and his conversations with me. This went on for days, and I never had this experience before. I will remember him as a quiet man, as a brother, as a best friend, who spoke very little, but really said a lot. He wrote the book, I Can Do What the F I Want. Thank you for laughing. Those of you that know him agree with me. So I said, so what's going to be the book I write when I'm forever gone? I just want to thank you all for letting me talk.
Thank you, Robbie. We'd like to invite up Marc's daughters as Lauren has some words she'd like to share. Right here in the middle. You don't have to talk into the microphone. They can hear you.
We call
I'm going to read it for Lauren. Okay. We call our father Poppy. The last 5 years were the happiest for him. He wanted me to go to JARC because he knew I would love it. We live close to my sister Jackie, Michael, and my nieces and nephew, Maya, Drew, and Sophie. We got to spend Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays with them whenever I trained at Jackie's gym. He always looked forward to seeing the kids, and I do too. He took me to all my activities every day. He trained me to file, make copies, and stamp envelopes when he had his businesses. And I loved it when he took me to dinner and all my appointments, and to Starbucks for our frappuccinos. I will miss him very much. Do you want to say this last?
I love you, Poppy. Thanks for helping me, Erica.
Next, we invite Maya to come forward with a few words.
Hi, my name is Maya. I'm Marc's granddaughter. My Opa was such an important person in my life. Not only my life, but his friends and families too. He came to my house 3 times a week for almost every week of the year. I loved it, and I know he loved it also. Whenever he came, he would always eat all our snacks. Because of this, we would have a weekly restock. Sometimes I would get a little frustrated with this, but deep down, I really didn't mind sharing with him. My Opa also had a huge love for 2Js. He went there so much that he knew most of the waitresses. There's never been a time I went to 2Js without him there. I made so many memories with him. Soccer is a sport I love to play. My Opa always took the time he could have spent doing something else to watch my soccer games. He would tell me stories about people in our family who played soccer. He would always mention that my Aunt Erica was a midfielder and that she was good because she practiced. I know he was always there to encourage Erica to play harder too. I could say he was lucky because I've always won when he came to my soccer games. For example, one of the games, 5-1, another one, 2-0, and semifinals, 3-2. He was never tough, but he was still an amazing impact. My Opa was a quiet person, but loved his family so much. I could tell he was happiest when he was around us, especially his wife, his kids, and his grandkids. He was so helpful around my house. My dad does not know how to fix anything. So if something were to break, we would call over my Opa, and he would always know the fix. Normally, if my babysitter had to go get something or go somewhere, my brother and I would never say yes. On days my aunt had her workout, even if it was 4:30 and he had to be somewhere at 6, he would always say it's fine if he could stay with me and my brother. I made so many memories with my Opa, memories I will never forget. I love him so much, and I know the rest of my family does too. He was an important person in my life, and I really miss him. I really hope he knows that. I'm so glad I was able to see him one more time 7 weeks ago when I left for camp.
That was beautiful. All of it was. So many beautiful memories, so many wonderful words shared. I have to say, as a rabbi, this is something I do often, unfortunately, but as I prepared for this memorial service, I found myself scouring my books and resources, searching for the right words to honor Marc. Nothing seemed perfect enough, so I turned to ours on Google, and finally they appeared. In a poem she wrote for her father, author Karen Boyer writes, "He never looks for praises. He's never one to boast. He just goes on quietly living for those he loves the most. His dreams are seldom spoken, his wants are very few, and most of the time his worries will go unspoken too. But he's there, a firm foundation through all the storms of life, a sturdy hand to hold on to in times of stress and strife, a true friend we can turn to when times are good or bad. One of our greatest blessings, the man that we call Dad." I know only a few of us here were lucky enough to call him Dad, but all of us know how truly this poem speaks to the character of the man we're remembering this afternoon. Though he wasn't a big talker, Marc was a strong foundational presence in the lives of those who loved him most, as we heard. He didn't need fancy things or accolades. Rather, he cared about his kids, his family, his cousins, his grandkids, and living every day as an all-around good guy. This is why we are here today with heavy hearts, because Marc Hirschberg was truly a good man with a good soul. Good soul. I feel honored to have known this firsthand, and for his family, I am so sorry he is gone. Sorry for the hurt and the ache his passing leaves behind. Sorry for what the psalmist described as the absence that will now be forever present. But while we may feel pain over losing Marc, we no longer need to worry about him. Even though he never complained, living had gotten hard. And our sages teach that death, even at its very worst, is only perfect sleep. So Marc is at rest now. We can picture him at his most chill and know he is eternally relaxed and at peace. And for that, we can be grateful. And though we may not be able to touch him, we can picture him watching over us the way he always loved seeing his kids and grandkids, simply being there and just watching them live their lives. He may very well still be watching, enjoying both the quiet around him and the show in front of him. In this way, I hear Marc's voice in the words of our liturgists who proclaim, "Death is nothing at all. I've only slipped away into the next room. I am I and you are you, and whatever we were to each other, that we still are. Call me by my old familiar name. Speak to me in the easy way which you always used to do. Laugh as we always laughed at little jokes we enjoy together. Play, smile, think of me. Let my name be ever the household word that it always has been. Why should I be out of mind because I'm out of sight? I am waiting for you, for an interval, somewhere very near, just around the corner. All is well." While these words can be comforting, they also feel challenging, I know, for all is not well for those who remain. All is not well for Terry. After 55 years together and almost 50 years of marriage, how lucky he was to find love like yours, such a young age, and to have it last all his life. Terry, I know you will miss the security of having his wisdom. You may think of him whenever you see someone smoking like a chimney or drinking Diet Pepsi like water. And you will think of him when something happens with your kids or grandkids, and you long to share it and hear his thoughts. For I know you will miss the good advice he always gave, his steadiness during life's hard times, and the way he took care of you and your family and handled whatever needed to be handled. And all is not well for Lauren and Erica and Jackie. How lucky he was to have 3 beautiful daughters whom he cherished. You girls made him happy. And I know you'll miss his presence, his short little "what up" text. And you'll miss the way he loved you and loved his grandchildren. You'll miss seeing the little one sit on his lap and play with his amethyst and gold necklace. Maya, Drew, Sophie, Sloan, and Rowan will miss their Opa. And that means all is not well for you or for Michael or Alex. And all is not well for his friends, his cousins, his extended family, those he protected, those he enjoyed, those he grew up with, and those he collected along the way. But as long as we keep going, as long as we keep remembering, then for Marc, now all is well. Marc had a rare soul. And what I'm about to say might surprise you because Marc's passing will leave behind no headlines in papers or stories in the news. But nevertheless, Marc was one of the most successful people I have ever known. Successful in the sense that unlike most of us who get distracted by life and end up living lives very different from the values we say we believe in, Marc never wavered. He really lived his life in keeping with what he believed mattered most, and what mattered most was his family. Marc never judged others, never had a bad thing to say about anyone. He never said no to anyone, especially his kids. He wasn't a big talker, but he was sharp with business decisions. He looked out for the underdog and always offered them kindness. And though he came from a comfortable family, he just didn't care about material things. Like I said, he was truly a good guy with a good soul. Eze hu ashir, who is rich, asked the Talmud. Hasameach bechelko, the one who is happy with what he has, the sages answer. Marc was content, always. How many of us can say that about ourselves? How we will miss him, his quiet presence, his reassuring soul, but how grateful we will be for the countless ways Marc will live on now forever in us. And thus today, with hearts full of love, we say goodbye, while simultaneously knowing that his love and presence will never be truly gone. Paraphrasing the poet W.S. Merwin, we can declare that Marc's absence has gone through us like a thread through a needle. And for as long as we continue to live, everything we do will be stitched with its color. Marc's memory will stay with us, and every time we hear the ancient words, Yikadal v'Yikadash Shmei Rabbah, we will confront our pain and our loss and simultaneously offer praise for the gift of having known Marc. And we will remember what tradition teaches, that even when a life has ended, the love we shared remains eternal. It's time now for our 2 traditional prayers of mourning. The first one is El Malei Rachamim. I'd like to invite all who are able to please rise. El Malei Rachamim, Shochem Bamromim, Hamtzeh Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Chashekina, Im Kedoshim Utchorim Ugezochar Harakia Mazkirim Et Nishmat Mordechai Ben Ari Shechalach Le'olamo. God of abundant mercy, God Most High, may the soul of our loved one Marc Hirschberg, who has gone into eternity, find the gift of perfect peace in your embrace, with the holy and pure whose light shines like the radiance of heaven. Compassionate God, Hold him close to you forever, so that his soul may be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May he find a home with you, and may he rest in peace. And together we say, Amen. It's time now for Kaddish Yatom, the mourner's Kaddish. If you know it, please join in. If you don't, I will be looking down, and every time I look up and nod, that is your cue to say Amen. It happens several times. Please join me. Yikadal v'yikadash shmei rabbah. Ve'almad divrach hirutei ve'amlich malchutei. B'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei z'chol beit Yisrael. B'galau v'zman kari v'imru. Yehei shmei rabbah mevarach le'olam l'almei almaya. Yiparach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kudsha b'richu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Damiram be'alma v'imru. Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya. V'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Osei shalom b'mromav. Hu ya'aseh shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Amen. Amen. You may be seated. This concludes the formal memorial service. Shiva is directly now after at the Santa Barbara Clubhouse off of Jog and Glades. Please make your way there. Yes. Thank you, Lauren. And even though this is the end of the service, the sharing of memories and love will go on. Yes. Thank you.
This is an